Hello there, BookTube friends. I am Linda, and I'm going to be talking to you about things I've been reading since the first of the year. I have read, I think, 18 books. So I'll try to make this as fast as possible, and I won't tell you a full book report on each book, but I'll just tell you a little bit about what it was and what I thought of it. I don't like to give book reports with book reviews with a lot of spoilers. I don't do that. But starting at the beginning of January, well, when the year began, I was finishing a book that I had borrowed from Overdrive. It was an audiobook, and I always count my books in the month in which they are finished. So I was just finishing up this book at the beginning of the year. It is called More After the Break. A reporter returns to 10 unforgettable news stories by Jen Maxfield. Um, I gave it 5 stars. It was 256 pages. I'm reading, by the way, out of my planner. So, yeah, my planner. So, it was a pretty interesting book. It was about a news reporter, a broadcast news reporter, who went back and reinvestigated some of her older stories that she had remembered uh, because they were outstanding to her, and re-interviewed some of the people from long ago and told us about it. So I like books like that. Sort of a memoir, sort of a true crime. Let's see. The next one that I finished was Mr. Midshipman Hornblower, because I'm doing the Hornblower readathon this year. And oh my goodness, I think I like Hornblower. The books are a little violent, but for the most part, really like them. Midshipman Hornblower. It is by C.S. Forrester. There are 11 books that we're going to be reading this year. I finished that one on the 5th of January. I gave it 4 stars, and it was 330 pages. The next one that I finished was a memoir called The Big Tiny. It was about a woman who built her own tiny home. She was up in Oregon at the time. It's called a Built It Myself memoir. That's the subtitle. And the author is Dee Williams. I enjoyed it. She didn't go into a lot of detail about exactly what she did to build it. In other words, it wasn't a book of building instructions. It was just her memoir about the time during which she built. And it was awesome. It's a beautiful little tiny home that she built. I'm pretty impressed. So let's see, what did I write about this? I gave it 4 stars, and it was about 309 pages. It's hard to see because I'm in the dark over here. The next one that I finished in January is The Indigo Girl by Natasha Boyd. I gave it 5 stars. It was 343 pages. It was a fiction, a historical fiction about a woman who really existed in South Carolina, and she started the indigo industry. She was actually very young, and her father left her in charge of his plantation, and he gave her the privilege of choosing whatever it was that she wanted to grow. And I was pretty impressed by what she did too. I like reading these books about strong women who do amazing things that improve the world. And so the next one I read was Calico Captive by Elizabeth George Spear. This was actually one of those free audiobooks that I got through Audible. I was pretty excited about it. Elizabeth George Spear, I've read some of her books before because they're on the Newbery list, but this one, Calico Captive, is not. It was about a girl who was kidnapped from New Hampshire by Native Americans, and she was taken to Canada and sold to the French there to work as a slave. And so I gave that book 5 stars, and it was 288 pages. The next one that I finished is a classic. It is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. And I gave it 5 stars. It was 117 pages. So it was a very short classic. You could even call it a novella. It would be a long novella. But I had tried to read this before, back in the 1990s. I got it out of the library and tried to read it. And that book was so incomprehensible and annoying because of it. But this time I really got it. The reason the characters were not really connecting in their conversations, well, there was a reason for that. And as I went on, I began to think that the one girl was a very unreliable narrator. And she was working in a man's house. Well, he was absent. So basically, she was just talking to another servant there. And there were 2 children involved. And it's not a happy book. It's kind of a horror story. And I usually don't read horror at all, but I was really glad that I read this one. It's a classic, and I am pretty much impressed by the way it was written and everything about it. Very unexpected. The next one I finished is Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. 5 stars and 252 pages. I'm reading that one because there's a Around the World in 80 Days readathon here on BookTube. And that was the group read. And I haven't finished the readathon. I don't have any intention of finishing the readathon in just 80 days, as I guess you're supposed to. But if I get to all the countries at all this year, that would be a win for me. So I'm kind of making my own rule about the readathon. You know, I gotta admit to you that I do not like read-along readathons that are done in just 2 weeks. Or people also have made them just for 1 week, and that is way too fast for me. I will do a month-long activity. I agreed to do this one, which was 80 days, which is a nice amount of time, but I just have so many other things to read. I can't do these particular books in the 80-day time span because I've got a lot of other things going on. Anyhow, I read it as I was talking to another booktuber, Arian, who also just read this. I don't like all the characters that were in it, but I thought it was a really cool book anyhow. Definitely a period piece. And I do want to read more books by Jules Verne. I've read one of his other books. I don't know which one it was. It was either the one that they went to the center of the earth, or the one where they went to the bottom of the ocean, or something. I just remember them going down, and I don't know which book it was, so I should probably read them both again to try to figure it out. And then the next book that I read was one that I also got free at Audible. It is A Perfect Weakness by Jennifer A. Davids, and I gave it 3 stars, 278 pages. And it was a Christian novel, but it just wasn't very well read or written. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the narrator at all. She was just so unemotional. I mean, like no emotion in her voice at all. So that was not my favorite book that month. In fact, it was probably my worst, and I hate to say it was a Christian fiction book because I usually like Christian fiction, but this particular one I did not like very much. I did like it enough to finish it, though. The next one that I finished was Middlemarch. I had been reading that all month long. It is by George Eliot. It was a buddy read with Faith, and I finally finished it on the 26th day of January. Gave it 5 stars. It was about 800 pages. It was a chunker. So it's about a little town in England and the people that lived there. I found it to be a very interesting book, and I'm glad I read it. Next one that I finished in January, and the last one that I finished in January, was Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Gave it 5 stars. 239 pages. I really intended to add up all the pages to see how much I read during the month of January, but I have not done that, so I'll put that in the description of the video if you want to know exactly how much I read in January and February. I want to know, and that's why I'm going to do it. So, Little House in the Big Woods. I love this book. It was about all the amazing things that her parents did to prepare for winter, and those people worked nonstop to take care of their family and their home and prepare food for the year, and pretty impressive. So my plan is to read all the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, maybe this year, maybe not this year. I'm not really in a big hurry to do that. I have a set of 5 of them, and I know there's 4 more that I need to buy to have a complete set. So I really intended to read another one in February, but I did not get to it. I thought, okay, that's fine because I can do it in March, which, as we know, is middle grade March. Next thing I want to talk about is the books that I read during February. All those other ones were January. Okay, January I read 10 books, and February I read 8 books. I started with North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Gave it 5 stars. It was 521 pages. It is, of course, a classic and a very interesting novel about a woman who lived in England. She had to move from a beautiful, idyllic home in the south of England to a smoky, dirty city in the north of England. And it was just about her pretty much, I want to say, coming of age. She's a young adult, a very young adult, still living with her parents. Anyhow, great book. The second one I finished was Lieutenant Hornblower by C.S. Forester. I gave it 5 stars, 320 pages. Again, Hornblower is an impressive character, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest this year. So the third one that I finished was Camp Far West by Randolph H. Pertol. He says on the cover, which I've got it right here, I'll show you the cover so you can verify. It says it's a memoir. Does it say memoir? A memoir of early California, but it's not really a memoir because he wrote it. This guy, Randall Pertol, wrote it, and he wrote it from the point of view of somebody who was Lieutenant Davis, who came to early California and worked here for the Army. And so it's kind of like a pretend memoir. And I just like reading books about California history. Even though it was a pretend memoir, it was very close to the historical record, and I learned a lot. And the worst part was that there was a chapter in here devoted to a massacre from the point of view of an Army person who committed the massacre against Native Americans. I did not like that chapter at all. It was really shocking and distressing to me, but the rest of the book was okay, you could say. Anyhow, I gave that book 4 stars. Did I give it 4 stars? I did. So the next book that I finished in the month of February was Airs Above the Ground by Mary Stewart. Now, I have been reading with a group on Goodreads, and it's about Mary Stewart literature. We're reading all of the romantic suspense books that she wrote in the order that she wrote them, and we're about halfway through the list now. Mary Stewart, oh, her books are just delightful. The descriptions are amazing. She always has them set in an exotic location. Usually a woman is there taking a vacation and then some unforeseen events happen, and it's just a wonderful reading experience. So this one I didn't like as much as some of the others. Airs Above the Ground, I gave it 4 stars. I'm probably going to make videos about these later if I can get myself in front of the camera. I've been having a hard time getting myself to get in front of the camera and actually record these. I apologize for that. The next one that I finished in the month of February. We're in February. It is The Tea Chest by Heidi Chiavaroli. Gave it 5 stars, 464 pages. It is a dual timeline novel. Half of it is set in the present time with a young woman who is training to become a Navy SEAL. And the other half is in the time of the Revolutionary War. And that character was participating. Let's say she knew the people who were participating. She knew some of the people who were participating in the Boston Tea Party. So it starts at that point in time before the war, but it continues on through the war. And I found it very interesting. I am planning to read a nonfiction book about the American Revolution later this year. It's 1776. I'm planning to read that later this year, and I thought this was a good way to get myself thinking about the American Revolution, because I really haven't read a lot of books about that time period, and I liked this one a lot. It is Christian fiction, but I would say it's not very it doesn't have very much about Christianity in it. Let's put it that way. And I find that's true with a lot of the current day Christian fiction authors, that they barely mention it. Anyhow, the next one that I finished is Braving the Thin Places by Julianne Stans. It is nonfiction, gave it 5 stars, 160 pages. It took me 2 months to go through it because it wasn't really a page turner, but at the same time when I did read it, I learned so much. She was very inspirational. She is a Catholic, and she was raised in Ireland, and she just told a lot about the Irish customs and culture and legends, and sort of mixed that up with her Christianity. So it was enlightening for a person who wants to know about historical Ireland, and it was from a spiritual point of view. I thought it was beautifully written. Glad I read it. The next one the one that I didn't write down here, which is not surprising. It was How to Write Like a Writer by Thomas C. Foster. I actually got very upset with this book. I gave it 2 stars because it was a book about writing, and I had been reading it for a long time. I put a lot of hours into this book, and then I got to chapters 18 and 19, and he had some political comments in there. It was like he used political situations as examples for what he was trying to show about writing, and it very much annoyed me because it was obvious what his political bias was. And I don't think political bias belongs in a book about writing. I was trying to find out about writing, which he is a professor of writing, and his book, to say something nice about it, he was very witty, and he was just humorous and tried to make it as entertaining as humanly possible. And I thought he did good at that, but it was just so annoying to me that he put his political bias into this book. And 2 stars. Even though I got it from NetGalley, and I kind of apologized to the publisher. Well, not to the publisher, because the publisher actually let these political statements remain in the book. So I was a little upset with the publisher as well as the author, but uh, anyhow, I won't ask for any more books from that publisher. The last one that I finished during the month of February is The Challengers by Grace Livingston Hill. I'm reading with a group of other fans of Grace Livingston Hill novels. They are Christian novels. They're much more Christian than the novels that are being presently written by Christian authors. Most Christian authors, I don't know about all of them, but anyhow, these were written earlier in this last century, from 1900. That's when she started. And this one that I read, The Challengers, was actually published in 1932. And she had been writing novels right along, like maybe every year she had one published. So she wrote a lot of novels. And she's considered like the mother of Christian romance novels. And this particular one wasn't a romance novel so much. It was about a family that was living during the Depression, and it was published during the Depression, and probably meant as a bit of inspiration for the people that were going through hard times, because it was all about a family enduring that kind of poverty. So that's it. That is all that I read in January and February. And I don't really like to talk too much about TBRs, because a lot of times I say I'm going to read something and then I never do. And it's kind of embarrassing to go back and see that I said I was going to read this book. Like in 3 different videos, I said I was going to read the book, and I never read the book. So it's so hard to predict the future and whether or not you're going to have time. But some of the books that I have written down on my blog that I'm going to read, I'll just tell you very quickly what they are. Let's see. Okay, first of all, I'm reading The Cloud of Unknowing. It's by a 14th century English monk. He chose to be anonymous. And I'm reading that with a group of booktubers that I think they're mainly Catholic, but I'm not Catholic. I'm reading a lot of Catholic literature. I am a Christian, but I'm not a Catholic, and I've never been a Catholic, and don't know very much about Catholicism, to be honest, but I like some of the literature, especially the older literature. So I'm reading The Cloud of Unknowing. I'm reading Life Along the Applegate Trail by Linda Lockard, which is actually a local book. I have it right here. It's a book by a local, and it took place just north of here. It is fiction. Okay, I'm reading Lifting the Veil on the Lost Continent of Mu by Jack Churchward and James Churchward, of course. I've been reading this for the Historathon for Ancient Times, and I am still reading it. I'm reading The Power of Praying for Your Adult Children by Stormy O'Martian. I've got it right here too. You see, sometimes I read real books instead of Kindle or audiobooks. And then some classics that I plan to read are The Painted Veil by W. Somerset Maugham, Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, An American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser, which is a very long book. I could read it for March of the Mammoths, but I really want to read those other 2 books first, so I don't know if I'm going to get to it. Hornblower and the Hotspur is our Hornblower book for the month. And then our Mary Stewart book for the month is Gabriel Hounds, The Gabriel Hounds, which I'm kind of excited because I found out that it takes place in Lebanon, and I've never read a book set in Lebanon before. And then the last one is the Grace Livingston Hill book of the month for our group on Goodreads. It's called The Obsession of Victoria Grayson. So that is all I can tell you about my reading right now. I brought you up to date. That will be my last winter update. The next time I make an update, it's probably going to be a few months from now. It'll be a spring update. I think I could do like one update 4 times a year and do some other kinds of videos in between. Well, talk to you later. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about books. And if you want to know exactly what I really thought about all these books, you could look at my reviews on Goodreads, because I give each book I think a pretty good review. Every time I finished a book, I do a review on Goodreads, and I'm probably still wanting to make some videos about specific books and different challenges that I'm doing. And there's a lot to be said for that, but getting myself in front of a camera is so hard these days. So thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you in another video.